Thank you. Welcome to our special council meeting tonight, June 13th. Please turn off your cell phone if you have one during the meeting, please. We'll have a moment of silence to be observed, please. Thank you. Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Barnes.
Here.
Reed. Brown. Here. Decker.
Here.
Garrett's here by phone.
Oh, great.
Oh, shoot.
Hey, Garrett.
Kraus.
Yeah, here.
French.
Here.
And Mayor Domingo.
Here, thank you.
You want to put that like on front?
When he speaks, I guess you'll have to hold it to your mic.
I don't know, it's
Okay.
scary.
Brown is here by via phone, so when he speaks, he'll do it in the mic off of her phone.
Okay.
So, okay. Mayor and council members' comments. Are there any comments from the council this evening? See none. Moving right along. Citizens' comments. Persons addressing the city council shall limit their comments to agenda items only and to no more than 5 minutes. Proper decorum is required. Are there any citizens' comments on the agenda this evening? See none. Consent calendar. We'll do A and B together. Approval of study session minutes for June 6, 2016, and approval of regular session minutes for June 6, 2016.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Are there any questions on either A or B minutes? See none. Voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. Thank you. Items for individual discussion. A, discussion approval resolution of 2016-35, continued funding for Albion Marshall Connector for the remainder of 2016.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Questions? Yes, Becky?
I wanted to propose an amendment that the money would have to be repaid within a 6-month period. Otherwise, it would have to be taken out of the general fund.
Okay. I have Resolution 2016-35. Due to budgetary reasons, yada, yada, yada. Therefore, is request to city authorize the release of $45,000. Okay. And then I do believe the contract that will be coming up here shortly has a statement in it, and that's Resolution 2016-39. The city previously approved the release of $45,000 from the city fund balance for the continued operation of the Albion Marshall Connector. It is now recommended that the intergovernmental agreement for continued operation to be approved. Where did I read that? Something about due to budget.
Sentence.
Pardon?
The last sentence. Keep reading.
It is important to note that the agreement provides for reimbursement if it becomes available. Okay. So that's in the second part. The only thing it does not say is the 6 months. Okay. So I guess, Cullen, can that be added to which?
Before we do, I'd like to respectfully suggest that it's very difficult for any business when receiving a loan, which is if repayment's going to happen, this would be in light of being a loan. Given its difficult financial situation, 6 months I don't think is enough time to repay that kind of, given that their annual budget is what, $78,000 a year, and we're going to loan them in the current language for some relatively long period of time to reimburse the city from that. But to make that 6 months means that they get one grant round for providing funding. So now we're going to have them in September apply for funding from some foundation or from the state, and they're gonna have to immediately pay that back to us, and then they don't have any money to keep going. So now they're fundraising to repay, rather than fundraising to repay, as well as fundraise for maintenance of their business. So I would say that yes, if we wanna put a deadline in their repayment, I'm fine with that, but I think 6 months means that there's no way there's not enough money out there for them to be able to find, to not only fundraise 45,000 for us, as well as 45,000 that they need every year to stay open. So given the number of Albion residents that use it, I would say I'm fine with a deadline for repayment. I just don't want it to be 2016. I just don't think they can do it. Given the fact that they're asking from us roughly 50% of their budget. And yes, maybe we can do some things, whether it be a millage or whatever, but that's not gonna happen this year. It might happen next year, but it's not gonna happen this year.
Cool.
Just so the
Hello?
Just a minute, Garrett.
just so the council,
Okay.
the way that the contract is written is that it provides for reimbursement if it becomes available, so that there's no guarantee that
Right.
we're going to be reimbursed, because it was made, and I included the language that way because the representations from the city of Marshall and the connector people made it very clear that, I mean, we may not get reimbursed. We may, and we hope to be reimbursed, but just, we may not. So, I mean, we can put whatever time frame we want on it, it may never happen, and I think something that the council should keep in mind is that, you know, you're talking about asking for reimbursement from a business that, it may very well be defunct in a year. So how do you know, and I shouldn't say business, because technically it's the city of Marshall, but the way that it's set up right now, it's very contingent, so there's no guarantee that we would ever get the money back.
Garrett, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so basically, I think that this is a tough situation, right? Essentially, this is not a city service. This started, I guess, like a coalition of different organizations that were offering a service, and then it expanded beyond, I guess, the initial purpose. And so I think some people have become dependent on it for medical care, so that's something we want to recognize. But then it's also spread, if you look at the presentation that Josh from Marshall did, a couple of weeks ago, it's spread to include other things like getting to school and to shopping and dining and those kinds of things. And so one of the things that I'm wrestling with is, on the one hand, there's a primary need for healthcare, and that's how it started. But it's also included now. It's kind of grown to a point now where, Albion residents are, basically spending money in Marshall, and the businesses collect that money in Marshall, and that money is paid in taxes to the city of Marshall. And that was one of the earlier questions that I asked the representative from Marshall was, would they be willing to contribute? And he made that very clear that the city of Marshall would not do that. So the issue that I have is trying to find a way, and I think that's what, even if we extended it, I heard Councilmember Dr. French was saying about the time frame for asking for it to be restored to the fund balance, but I think that it should in a way be restored because, from my understanding, fund balance is kind of traditionally used as like a safety mechanism for the city. So if we had an abrupt kind of drop in property taxes and we needed money to run the city for 6 months, it's really there for those kinds of emergencies. And so I think that it almost does need to be paid back. Do we kind of debate over the time frame? Yes, and I think the millage thing. The last thing I'll say, the millage, if that was proposed, we'd have to have a lot of discussion about that because, for example, I don't think anyone has thought about the fact that right now, if a person lives in Albion and they do not have transportation, and let's say they work in Albion or shop in Albion, they cannot take the connector to shop or to ride to work in Albion. So even if it got to a point of doing a millage, we're basically paying to help people go to Marshall, but the people who stay in Albion are not getting that benefit, similar to the Marshall Dial Ride service.
Okay, I'm sorry. Who was that? Go ahead.
My concern is, the presentation stated there was an increase to 500 ridership. Did that mean people or individual rides? Also, I was concerned about the business model. Why is the connector in financial difficulty right now? I've received information that 92% of the ridership is Albion residents, and they're taking the connector to hospitality careers in Marshall, such as labor. I think it's a Taco Bell over there or something like that. And here our new Taco Bell is, from the information I've received, is looking to put people on its morning shift. And Team 1, a workforce here in Albion, is having a tough time manning its line. I guess I'm saying that our labor force is being, transported outside of the area, where at Team 1 they make $4 more an hour here than they do when they travel over there. I don't know if there are some challenges to their employment here to there. But also, I've been informed that we're connecting at Albion's Family Fair, and riderships going to Marshall's Family Fair to do their business, which they have every right. But being a city councilman, I would hope that they would see that we have a financial base here in our city. We need the tax base, and we would hope that they could be serviced here in Albion. Also, I was concerned about a payback clause, and when I saw the word "if," I knew then, as Cullen has explained, that legally lets them off the bond, the word "if." So then if we take this from our, what I call our rainy day fund, would we end up paying our back out of the general fund, removing from our own city services? And finally, the Chamber of Commerce had a few words for me, and they stated they received the presentation and they were concerned about the business model. They were concerned about the numbers, and they're literally unhappy. Maurice, we do not support it. And that's our business community, leadership. When I first heard this last week, I thought it was a great idea to make sure the Albion people can get rides to their jobs over in Marshall. But looking at it secondary, people are catching rides to school over there through the connector, shopping, they're dining, and the health care. But there are other available rides here in Albion that they can take. I won't advertise the taxi companies, but there are a couple of taxi companies here that can do it. So at this point, I haven't decided on how I'm going to vote, but it looks like it's not in the best interest of Albion at this time, because it began as a healthcare ridership system and then moved forward.
Yeah.
I would like to know about the business model. And then, and I'm not being in any way attacking the director, but I would like to know how much money that position pays and some of the intricate numbers at some other time. But that's just where I'm at. For me right now, I'm on the fence. Thank you.
Okay. Becky?
I have several questions or statements. One, actually, Maurice brought up an excellent point, because we do have taxi businesses in town. If basically what we would be doing is using city funds to finance a company, a privately held company, is that?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's not.
All right, so,
We can't use public funds for
but we're
private.
still using public funds to support a business.
No, the connector is operated by the city of Marshall.
Correct.
So the only way that we can sanction the use of public funds for the connector is because it's operated by Marshall and it's a non-profit, it's a not-for-profit business.
No, I appreciate you clarifying that for me, but
Or
my
I keep, I apologize to the council, I keep using the word business, and really, myself and the city should not think of it as a business, because every time I say it,
It's a
myself,
service.
it makes me uncomfortable.
It's a service.
Yeah,
Well, when Maurice pointed out, though, I don't want to be in a position where we're funding one organization when there are businesses in our town that would be possibly being able to transport people. My other question would be, why were we only approached at the 11th hour and not given time to be able to actually take our time, see a business model, do some discussions? Why were we only approached when they were in danger of closing? And the reason that I asked for the 6 month was because I wanted to have it paid back before the budget work started. That was where I came up with that number.
Okay. Lynn, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because this has only been going on now for about a year, what were their plans when they first started? And if necessary, have they considered maybe raising their rate a little more than what is here? What, is the $2 one way or two way?
Looks like one-way fares are $2 for adults, $1 for children 13 plus. For disabled senior citizens and children 5 through 12 are free for caretakers, children under 5 with a paid rider.
That's what I was looking at, and it seems so some of that could be raised just for children. I wouldn't do that too, but like adults, I'm sure there's people that probably could afford to pay 5 rounds, 4 rounds. I mean, in some kind of way, they're going to have to get this under in a spot to where they don't have to come back again, that they're going to be self-sufficient.
Okay. I'm looking, oh, I'm sorry, Andy, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess what this comes down to is this is a service that 500 rides a month are providing Albion resident, well, 92% of those rides are Albion citizens requiring a service that to get to a medical appointment, to get to a job, to get to Marshall for whatever reason, to school, etc. So the question then we have to ask ourselves is it the role of government to facilitate job growth and expansion for our citizens, access to quality health care, and educational opportunities for our citizens? In my view, the answer to all three of those questions is a resounding yes. We can argue about the business plan of this service that has been created that we are being asked to help support. Marshall is supporting it at some level. We have supported it at some level. Nonprofits in the area have supported it at some level. We can argue about that for a very long time, but in the end, if we do not approve this, then at the end of this month, 540-something rides will cease to exist. And we will be telling those, our most vulnerable citizens, the ones who are underemployed, underpaid, non-transportation available citizens, that we as a government do not value their needs. And I think that's the wrong message. We have how many dollars in our fund balance? We are asking for a one-time payment of $45,000 that says to our citizens, we support you in you getting a job. Team One Plastics cannot hire an infinite number of people. Businesses cannot hire an infinite number of people. This connector provides jobs for our citizens of Albion in an environment where jobs are hard to come by. And so $45,000 for a one-time service says to the citizens of this town, this city, that we, the city council of the city of Albion, support our citizens in their access to health care, their access to employment, and their access to education. It's that simple. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So I get that, but I'm not clear in what Mayor Pro Tem French said, how that addresses people who have transportation issues within town.
The goal of the
Or-
Albion Marshall
or
connector
if
is,
someone wants access to healthcare, that's not Oakland, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at is and then even before we get at that issue, the issue of, like I said, this is really kind of unprecedented.
I can't hear what he said.
And I think that we should be, really, really cautious in pulling from fund balance, because usually when we pull from fund balance, it's been most recently for the internship, but that was a relatively small amount. But that was like an essential part of city business in terms of the master plan. So that's as essential as we can get. And then before that, I remember we did the salt truck thing, and that's like an essential city service. So I get what you're saying, but if let's say we do this, and then we don't do a millage, or that's voted down, we basically, we're going to run into the same issue. So I think the conversation we should have really is, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think the question that Councilmember Barnes asked about the business plan and the sustainability of this model, I don't think that's a bad question, actually, because we're going to continue to face that.
So my response to that, Councilman Brown, is that if you think about the 1% or 0.5% income tax that citizens of the city of Albion pay, regardless of where they work, I would argue that if we cut this connector system, we're going to lose X number of jobs for our citizens. That means that that's income tax that's not coming to the city of Albion. So again, I would argue from a financial point of view that having this connector for the long-term success, which is part of our master plan, helping to find jobs for our citizens, that this expense pales in comparison to those opportunities. And we will recoup some of that through their income taxes that they pay at those jobs, whether it be at Tenneco or in fast food or where have you. With regard to the transportation within the city, again, there is no such thing as an expectation for a full access. This service provides one service, Marshall to Albion, Albion to Marshall. It is not in its plan at this time to be a taxi service within the city of Albion. Now, could we ask that happen, especially wrapped around healthcare? Could we ask the Albion connector to pick up people one part of town and deliver them to the dialysis center or to a doctor's office? Absolutely, that can become part of the conversation. But the model that this connector has as a program run by the city of Marshall, that's not in the plan now, but I don't think that's reason enough to not support this service with a vote of no.
Yes, Becky?
And I agree with a lot of what Councilman French said, about needing to support our citizens, but it goes back to, I've never heard, unless you're gonna call it a charitable contribution, giving an organization money without the commitment of repayment when Albion is in such a financial crunch seems absolutely ridiculous to me.
I guess what we need to do, excuse me, I'm looking at this, and it says the current annual budget is $75,768. Is that Albion's, or is that the total budget for the connector?
That is the budget for the connector.
Okay. So,
That's total.
pardon?
Did she say total?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then I'm looking at the spreadsheet. That's got us out here at, which figure do I read, the 77 or the 68?
The 77 at the bottom. If you're looking at the one without the 45,000.
I'm looking at 2017. Is the other one 2016? That's the one I ought to be paying attention to.
Both.
No, they're both 17.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So now the budget's gonna go from 75 to 77, am I correct? It's gonna go up.
The 75 was my number, and that was based on the conversation. If you're looking at the spreadsheet, which was from Joshua, from the Albion, from the Marshall service, his spreadsheet indicates the 77,864.
Okay, that's the total budget for the total connector, right? That's our share as well? That's what it costs to run per year?
Yes,
Okay. So just short of $78,000, right? And our cut is, this portion is $45,000. How much did we pay prior to the $45,000?
nothing.
From the beginning of the year to now, we paid nothing?
Correct.
Who picked that tab up?
That was all of the grant funding sources.
Okay. Now, what grant funding is left out there? I'm taking it, these grant funding, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I know you don't have the same paper I do, but New Freedom Grant, Battle Creek Community Foundation, Albion Community Foundation, Area Aging, Calhoun County Senior Millage, those, and Oakland Hospital, those were all donations
Correct.
towards this?
Yes,
Okay. And that sum comes up to what? Does anybody know?
$59,510.
Okay. So that was in grant funds, right?
Correct.
And the rest of it came from the state, the MDOT? Is that right?
It's an anticipation that it will come from the state as reimbursement, starting with the first quarter, which begins in September. So that reimbursement will come in January of 2017.
And this 45,000 that we're deciding what to do with right now will take us until part of 2017, am I correct?
Correct.
Do you know what month?
I believe that's to the end of their budget year, which would be August, so the summer of 2017,
The state or Marshall's?
the connector service.
Okay, they run on a different budget year
Yes,
They
than,
run on the state
than what
system.
Marshall?
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so they're running October to?
Yeah,
oh,
September.
Okay. So if we give them the 45,000, right, that's gonna take us through 2017?
That'll take them through September of 2017.
Right.
Okay. And when this was brought to me, I thought we had a couple more months than we had until July 1st. I don't know what the change was, and it was a sudden shock to all of us when we knew we had to come up with $45,000.
Correct.
And I went to Cheryl and I told Cheryl, I said, look, so we don't have a lapse in time, so we don't lose anything, let's take it to the council to see if we can't take this out of our funding, and let's see what's out there available that we can bring some of that money back. If I'm not mistaken, one of them was the philanthropic women.
Correct.
They have to be approached yet?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay. And the max you're gonna get there is 10,000, am I correct? If they do that. Okay, so there's 10,000 of the 45,000.
Maybe.
Right, everything has a question on it, I can't, but anyway. What else was out there that you were gonna go to?
Firekeepers.
Firekeepers, and the max at firekeepers could be up to include 35,000, am I correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well, just for, so there's our 45 grand, okay? What else is out there?
Well, there
Mr. Mayor?
there's the Albion Community Foundation, but their next round is not until September.
Yeah, because they've already given, am I correct? 5,000, okay. But these are the two main ones?
Yes.
That you're gonna try to hit
Correct.
within, tomorrow for the philanthropic women?
Yes.
Firekeepers, excuse me, comes up when?
Theirs is the deadline for the application is June 24th.
Wow, we're kind of pushing things here. Okay,
Hello?
yeah,
Yes, Garrett?
Mr. Mayor, may I comment?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. What do you say?
Wants to make a comment?
Oh, go ahead.
So I guess, and I'm curious just because Councilmember Barnes asked this, but have we talked to businesses in town about what? I'm curious. He made a comment about what their position might be. Has there been any discussion about that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Talk to businesses in town in terms of What?
The expedition discussion for business people, who I had mentioned, if they could be doing anything to help the situation. That's what I read.
The state?
No, businesses in town.
Oh,
How could they help get in contact with their response?
Mayor, if I could take a moment to respond to this and a number of the questions that are out here right now from the council members. The Albion Marshall Connector began, I think, right about the time I started here. And I started attending some of their meetings. And since that time, I've been sharing periodically their minutes with you, as well as they have come here on several occasions to make presentations. So I think we've known for some time that they were facing some financial challenges. And one of the things that I don't think they could possibly have planned for was the overwhelming response in terms of the citizens that are utilizing the service. So that's been a good thing. The other side of that coin, however, is the more that people use it, the more their costs of operations go up. The service itself does primarily benefit residents who are without transportation here in Albion. That is without question. We have received quite a few phone calls and people coming in imploring you to consider assisting with the service because they need to go to their doctor's appointments, dialysis, and things of that nature. Some people are going to their jobs. In the meetings with the Albion Marshall Connector, and I try to make most of those meetings, we are already having conversations in terms of how can we expand the service to include an inner loop within Albion. So we're having those conversations. The challenge is Albion is not contributing to the service at all in any way, form, other than the fares. And Councilmember Reed, in regards to the fares, you're never going to operate a transit service off of the fares. Right now, it's between 11 and 13% of the revenues that they generate. So even if you doubled it, you would have a decline in ridership, but at the most, it's going to generate 20% of the revenues needed to operate the system. So now, no matter what, they need a sustainable source of revenues to keep the service going. So then the question becomes, what is it going to be? It can't continue to be grant funding because eventually these grant funding organizations are also going to start saying we've done this for 2 or 3 years and we're going to continue. So it's an ongoing effort to try to solicit more and different funding mechanisms. It started with the concept of supporting handicapped individuals and those who had disabilities. And that was a primary funding source for establishing the service. However, the level of those with disabilities utilizing the service didn't warrant the ability to be able to continue that grant funding mechanism. So they've been looking for other funding mechanisms. One of the things that's coming forward is they are now going to be able to seek reimbursement, assuming that funding's in place to continue the service to the end of the year. Starting next year, they can start getting reimbursement from MDOT. So I believe that's up to 50% reimbursement. So that's going to help tremendously. The other questions you had raised relative to the impact on the fund balance, the general fund balance. The general fund balance, what we call the rainy day fund, is typically used for one-time situations and for emergencies. It should not be used for ongoing operations. So in that sense, this does in how you can use the general fund for those purposes. It's not going to support a private organization. It's supporting a service that is provided between a partnership between the 2 communities of Albion and Marshall. And I have also in one of the handouts that you received today is it's called Fund Balance Impact. You have that sheet in front of you. And it provides, based on the draft audit numbers that we received, we're still finalizing the draft. But right now, the current fund balance as of December 2004, I think that was 15, was just over $1 million. We're expecting a fund balance increase based on the audit of $88,000, that left with a fund balance of $1,162,257, $1 million. Okay, $1.16 million. So even if you take away the 45,000, that leaves you with 1.1 million fund balance. So there is an impact even in a worst case scenario, but it's not as detrimental because we already have additional dollars that we had not planned on. So I would like you to take that into consideration also. And the reason that I had mentioned looking at the possibility of a millage is because the model for this service was, I think they had anticipated that it was not going to have so many riders and it could be supported by some smaller funding mechanisms. Well, the good news is it's really popular and it's obviously very much needed, but there has to be another long-term funding mechanism. So one of my suggestions to you was to look at putting before the voters, if they're willing to support this service, that they do so with the millage. And on the other side of this paper indicates what a half mil would generate, about 40,000, which is approximately what is a gap that they have in annual operations. Because quite frankly, they're going to be facing the same scenario each year. It's not just a one-time situation. They need ongoing funding. The other positive side is because this has become clearly evident to county-wide officials that there is need for transit services, especially on this end of the county, that we are having conversations in terms of a county-wide transit service. But we're just now starting those conversations. So I don't foresee that coming into place or coming before the voters before 2 years, but those conversations are started. And it's primarily because they see the immense demand in the Albion area and this side of the county for transit services for people to get to their jobs and to get to housing and to get to entertainment and to get to medical services. I also think that the trend is going to start changing because we now have the dialysis center here. We're going to have more businesses here. So I think we're going to see ridership that trend start to change, and that more Marshall people will be coming to Albion to have those experiences. But these are things that are going to take time. So what you have before you, yes, it's a request for 45,000. There are ongoing efforts. I'm trying diligently. I'm working with my colleagues in Marshall to try to seek additional funding, but can I guarantee we're going to be repaid any of it? I can't guarantee it. It won't be from a lack of effort, but we definitely, that is the situation that we are facing.
Thank you.
Yes. Colin?
You know, just so the council understands, I mean, when I put together the agreement for this, the way that I thought about it, you know, at first I was hesitant because I was concerned about the nature of the service and how we would be utilizing public funds. But then I sat and I thought about it and how I think the council should think about it. And I tell you that's not because I have a dog in the fight, but because I want you to understand, at least from an attorney's perspective, I think you need to think of this in the context of a public service and an intergovernmental agreement. And I'll give you an example. You know, many municipalities, when you've got a city, say for example a city that borders a township, very often there's an intergovernmental agreement to provide, say, sewer services. And every year that township pays the city a portion for their sewer services. Well, this is basically the same thing, except you're paying for public transportation in this case. And so when I kind of put it in that context, that's how I, as your city attorney, wrapped my head around it and said, okay, that's how we're going to make this work in terms of making the agreement legal and making it okay to use public funds. So just food for thought. I mean, I don't think you guys should look at this as a gift. Rather, it's paying for a public service.
Yes, Maurice?
To me, looking at this conversation, it's like we're doing the business plan, the marketing plan, target market, and a focus group. I'm looking at this as a situation that's destined to fail just based on their own sheet here, where it says, how is the AMC currently funded? It tells you that only 13% of the funding needed is being supplied by the fairs. That's not a good business model to try to sustain
a service, because it's constantly looking for some type of grant money or some type of aid and funding. The ridership cannot keep it afloat. It looks as though to me they got out of their niche, the healthcare rides, and they expanded it to the point where you got the shopping, you got the education in their brochure, and it's just got beyond the dining, the work. It's gotten beyond of what they could sustain or provide, and they're asking us to come in and say, hey, give us $45,000 for one time, and we want to ask you again. But it's not based on a foundation of a success or sustainability. And as bad as I want to see it through,
All right, go
can I
ahead.
finish, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Maurice, I thought you were done.
It's a situation where it wasn't well planned, it wasn't well thought out. Now, I believe most of us sitting here now, our emotions are telling us to vote yes. And it's just hard for me to support this. I mean, it just is.
Okay.
Because now, if we give them the 45,000, they make it until 2017, then they got to go somewhere else. They go into philanthropic route. No guarantee they'll get it. Then the other 10,000 for the foundation, no guarantee. We're still on the hook, and then we're working with 50% less of our employees than we did 10 years. We have a tough time giving them raises. We got streets that need fixed and all these other major things that are helping sustain our city. Look at the rail line that's being put in. Look at the new energy that's coming in. We have major things to do. Now, if they go back to the healthcare, I could support it. But to be supporting another city that has stated it will not put any other money into this here, and their logo is on here also, and they're, to me, they're cherry picking our people to bring them to their cities to do business, to help their tax base. Thank you.
Garrett?
So, first thing I want to just thank the council for allowing me to call in. Traffic is terrible since M14 and 245 or 275 are closed, so I appreciate that. I was talking about it over the phone, but basically my thought process in this, because it's tough, is similar to what Councilman Barnes said, that it started off as a way to assist a particular segment, and it expanded beyond that, beyond the ability of the organizations that started it. So now what we're trying to do today, and I guess it's being proposed for the future, is to turn it into a city service. But if it's a city service, the big issue I have is that transportation inside of town is a huge issue. And so even if we were to do that, I mean, even for the rest of the year, again, if someone lived in town and they needed to get around town, this is not going to help that segment of the community. But it does, and I guess, I mean, it's truthful. It's regardless of how much money, we don't know how much money is being spent in Marshall, but those are tax dollars that are not being spent here. And so then it does go back through business taxes to the city of Marshall. And we don't get that. And so from my understanding is that while we have not paid to run the service, neither has Marshall, right? It's been primarily grants, right?
Yes, that was my understanding.
Okay, so no one's really, so we can't say, we can't make it sound like Albion was freeloading, because no one paid for it except through grants anyway, so the grants are running out. My initial thought was, well, as a compromise would be to say, okay, we need to pay it, it needs to be paid back. Whether that's 6 months or a year, whatever, because this is an emergency thing. And that's one thing, when I first got on council, we have situations where the city or council was asked to pass emergency ordinances and do things like that because, it's an emergency, we have to do this now, or it's end of the world.
And I was always very hesitant to do that because, and I know that he presented, but I was curious about when they knew that this was going to happen. Because, you know, when you do a budget, you're anticipating certain things. I'm sure you'd have to know this is going to happen. So, if there would be any way to say, if we could take it back to its original purpose and say, okay, you know, healthcare, those kinds of things. I mean, the question that I asked the manager earlier was about whether or not there's I guess Oaklawn provides a, I'm gonna be quiet, because I'm going too long, but provides a shuttle for people who go to that hospital. Is there a shuttle?
I'm not familiar with one. I haven't
Okay.
had a chance to confirm.
Okay. So I guess if there was a way to limit to its original purpose, I think I could be on board with it. But the issue is, again, it's going to be a situation where we're basically, in a way, subsidizing for the non-healthcare issues, sending money out of the community. And the people who do live in town, it's not providing a service. So that doesn't seem like a well thought out city service. So.
Yeah, Sandy, I'm sorry. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
In trying to understand what Councilman Brown is saying, he potentially could support if it was only a medical service. That he's concerned about dollars going out of our community versus coming into our community. And then the third was, when did they know their financial difficulties were happening? To answer that last question first, as I recall, we heard from Josh to St. Albion in March. He was hired in April. Yeah,
It's in May. There's only like
Josh was hired in March. And he came to us as soon as he did his data collection, and realized it. With response to dollars coming in and out, we still need to consider that while, yes, the services have expanded to meet the needs of Albion residents in other areas, people in Albion are going to Marshall to do things that they cannot do here, like work. So if I were to ask you, would you support the service if it was providing transportation for employees to work in Marshall?
Well,
I just need a yes or no.
you can't do that, Andy.
Why not?
Well, what I was gonna say is that
Because you're providing you're asking that you would say you would provide a service for people seeking medical treatment at Oaklawn because they can't get those services in Albion, correct?
I think, but what the city's doing in a way, though, is saying, so let's say you work, and I don't want to call it an employer, but there's a certain automotive
They
supplier.
work at Tenneco, you can say it, come
Not
on.
Tenneco, it's not Tenneco, actually. It's headed east on 94. So let's say you work there, and you need transportation.
Yeah.
So you don't get transportation to that.
Well.
So what I'm saying, so what I'm trying to say is that what the city's saying is that if you work here, we're going to subsidize transportation. But if you work for, if you go to Henry Ford Allegiance, if you go to, somewhere else, and again, even if you live in town, that's the thing. If you live in town and you want to go to your job in town, you don't get that service.
That's correct.
So,
and I said earlier.
yeah.
Just to follow up on that, I said earlier that this service is not intended to be the be-all and end-all transportation service that the city provides its residents. It is one. So could we envision another service coming? and saying, hey, we want to provide transportation for people to go to Mackey and Jackson, or to provide an intra-city transportation, absolutely, we could investigate those possibilities. But to wait until those structures are in place before we approve of this one, I think is short-sighted. 500 rides. 500 rides are gonna go away in 3 weeks if we don't approve it. It's that simple, 500 rides. So now we don't have connection to healthcare either in Jackson or in Marshall. We don't have rides for people who work in Albion, in Marshall or Jackson. So, because we're saying, so yes, there are people who work in Jackson and we are not able, this service is not intended to provide that transportation. We are not condemning them to only working at places that we drive, that we provide service to, but it is but one service. And we can talk on a much larger scale about what is the role of the city of Albion's government services to provide services to the needy in our town, and I welcome those conversations. Would I love to see this expand so that we had transportation to all the area factories, whether it be Brembo or Mackey or Tenneco or whatever? Absolutely, I want to have those conversations. But what's before us is this particular transportation service, and we have to decide if we want to provide those transportation for our medical needs, for our employment needs, for our shopping and other needs. And to not say yes, I think, is a little provincial. It's protectionist. It's not having a larger view about the economic realities that we are facing in this part of the state. And so I will vote yes. I may be the only one that votes yes, but I'm voting yes.
So, given the seriousness of it, I don't think you would object to having language that would say it needs to be reimbursed.
I will support the wording that will say that we will ask our city manager and the organization to seek funding that will reimburse us in a timely way. I object to 6 months, and I object to a guarantee of full repayment, because the places that we can go for funding are grant-funded things, and those grants are at the vagaries of some larger board that makes those decisions. And so without, what's the punitive action if they don't repay us?
Well,
what do we do? They give us their money back. They don't have any money to give back to us, right?
I think, I tend to look at things from a long-term perspective. So it's, so the issue is, if the end goal is to ask for millage, and even if we ask for millage, we're still gonna run into the same issue, right? We have to ask ourselves, do we want to, expend that now? I think that's the issue.
Right, I wasn't going the way of a millage. That's not up for us to decide. We don't control this service.
We do put it on the ballot. If we decide to go that way, the council would be the.
Well, the problem is, from what I understand, is if I'm reading this right, even if you do the millage, it's gonna be short.
Right, if it's
It's
only
only
a half
gonna raise,
mil, yeah.
it's only gonna raise 40,000.
Right.
And you don't know what the cost is gonna be,
Right.
later down the road.
Right.
So,
Right, so I approve language that says that we expect the Marshall Albion Connector and its supporters to seek every possible recourse for repayment. But I would not support the idea that they have 6 months to find it, and I would not support the idea of some sort of punitive action if they are unable to.
Colin,
I was just gonna say, as far as reimbursement, and Cheryl can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was made clear by Marshall's government that they were not gonna participate in reimbursement, so from a contractual standpoint, I don't know where the council would expect the money to come from. We can put in there that, City of Marshall is gonna reimburse the City of Albion, but City of Marshall's not gonna sign it. Because I think they've already said no. So again, I don't know, you're not gonna be able to collect from a defunct entity that.
didn't I just read that in the contract? It said something in there about.
I don't know if that's
funds come
entirely
in.
correct. They understand that it is our hope and expectation that as funds are raised to offset this year's operations, that the city would be reimbursed, but it's definitely if those funds become available.
Right, that's exactly what it says in the contract.
Right.
Right. And if I could add, because I did ask in terms of just having a straight up dollar ride type service here in Albion, the one in Marshall, it costs about $500,000 a year, and they have a local millage to support that. And the cost estimated for Albion, and I haven't had a chance to go through all of these numbers, but for the annual operation, that's approximately $136,000. The 2 buses would be $100,000, the dispatch system $15,000. So it's not an inexpensive service to operate under any circumstance. So I think our main question is how can we leverage what is in existence to have the optimal service for our residents, and that obviously that would include having some type of inner loop service available to be able to be a patron to our local businesses and facilities, as well as hopefully one day even expanding it so that people can have transportation to job placement that are outside of both Albion and Marshall. That's a longer term conversation, but we are starting to have those conversations.
Yes, Maurice.
It has been mentioned about the 500 people riding over. It's been mentioned about those who are going to work. Has there been any Excel spreadsheet on how much financially the tax base, the city of Albion, has put on its book based on that ridership? What I'm seeing here is this paper says prepared by the city of Albion, 6/13. Then I see the 2 logos. So I'm hearing now that the 2 cities are not willing to come together to provide this service if both sides feel that it's such a great idea. I guess I'm slipping back into the business plan, the target market, the focus group that you were using. It looks exactly like, to me, somewhere in the city of Marshall, somebody decided, hey, let's run a bus service over to provide for those Albion people who can't afford to get here. Now, they come and get them, and they see 13% of their gross financially cannot support the service. That's like me going out buying a $100 car and only having $13, and then going to ask my mother and my father and my aunt and uncles for the rest of the money down the road. And they don't want to give it to me. It's not a good idea. There has to be a better idea to provide the service. And I'm just adamant that this service should get back to what it originally started. Healthcare rides. People would be more willing to give $45,000. Philanthropic people, more grants, but they expanded it to a level of where it was an advantage of some profitability, period. And I don't know why we're still going over this. I think we should move on to vote.
Okay. So, are there any more questions?
One last thing. I'm just looking at the presentation, and I appreciate him sending it to us. I know it was in the packet too, but it'd be helpful to know, because Marshall doesn't have income tax, right? I don't think. That's correct. Yeah, they don't have income tax. So we do get that whole entire 1% income tax. But it'd be interesting to know, like, how many people are actually, how many jobs we're talking about. I mean, that'd be helpful to know.
So,
and not in a utilitarian way, kind of doing that, but I'm nervous with the idea that, a private thing started nonprofit, it's grown larger, and now the city's being asked to morph it into a public service. And it's not doing even the basics. I mean, it could be different. So we talk about intergovernmental things, right? The district library is an intergovernmental thing. If Marshall said, okay, Albion, let's all go into transportation authority and, do an Albion-Marshall dial ride, I'd say, okay, because then what would happen, you'd be able to drive back and forth between Albion and Marshall, and then also within both communities. But as this operates right now, that doesn't happen. So I think that's my big concern. I think we need to do a little bit more talking and figure out how we can tailor it to the medical aspect of it. And because again, we're providing rides people to the hospital in Marshall and to doctor's offices in Marshall, and not to other communities. So I think that there needs to be some effort from institutions to pitch in, instead of saying, you know, it all falls on us. And then, like I said, the people in town don't get an intra-community transportation, and, you know, the tax dollars don't come back because they're not contributing, so.
Okay, all right. My turn? Okay, we did a lot of talking, all over $45,000, and I know that's like $1 million to a lot of people, including myself. We don't give back to our citizens near enough. $45,000 out of our rainy day fund, yes, it's gonna hurt, but it's not gonna kill us. This is gonna last for a year. I will hold Cheryl's feet to the ground. She will go to every organization she can and get as much money as she can to put this money back into the fund, but I am not gonna stop this transportation at this time, because I, for one, feel that a lot of this is our fault for not providing jobs and things in this town for people. We've had the last 25 years to do so, and we haven't done a blessed thing to help our citizens out so they don't have to go someplace else. Brimbo, places like that, why in the world didn't they come here? Because we had people fighting them, wanting them to go someplace else. My vote is to give up the $45,000. I know that's probably different than what I said before, but I think, Cheryl, you need to do everything that you can to bring that money back here, but because this is gonna last for a year to keep that transportation, that gives us a year to plan what we can do for our citizens to make up for this transportation. I don't like taking our money someplace else, but if we don't have what it takes to have people happy in this town, they're gonna go someplace else. So what our challenge is you put those businesses here so they don't have to go there, and then we don't have to have the transportation. But in the meantime, we need to get these people to the hospital and to the doctors. If they stop at the stores, they stop at the stores. I can't help that. But I need these people to get to the doctors where they belong, and the health care and the education, if that's so true that some of them are doing that. But to me, it's the health care. That means a lot to me to get them there. So instead of making, the contracts are already done, I think Cullen has already done that. There's no promise that we'll get the money back, but there's a promise to the citizens that this is gonna last for one more year. And we'll do what we can to put that money back, hopefully by the end of the year, because I think there's things out there that we can go to and do what we can to get that money back. But I can't stop for the citizens right now to do that, but I want Cheryl to understand she has got to do your best to get that money back here.
She will.
Okay? Yes, Lynn.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but I also see that the last meeting we had, there was an argument about whether or not we was gonna give Cheryl support of somebody else to help her while she did the other necessary things that need to be done.
Yep.
So if we're gonna put her feet to the grind, then we need to give her the support that she needs while she's going to all these places, finding all that money, and finding whatever needs to be done to make this a working situation. We need to give her the help that she needs so that her job does not.
I second that motion.
But that's a good point. Mr.
Amen.
Amen.
Because when we talked about this, she'd already told me about these other places she was gonna go to. So I'm gonna hold her feet to that, you know, to do that. I'm not saying we're not giving her support. She's getting all the support tonight that she needs. She's being told what to do. But, you know, like I said, I wanna make sure. I'm sorry, as a council, we've gotta face our citizens, and I'm not doing it because it's an election year or anything like that, but we have to hold people responsible. And I was part of the connector when it started. I was as shocked as everybody else when we had to have this money by a certain date, because I thought we had 2 or 3 more months to get this thing going, and it slapped us. And I hate to stop that transportation. I hate money to leave Albion when it doesn't have to. But until these people downtown Albion start opening up these businesses and buying, instead of just buying things,
And employing Albion people.
you know, and getting things moving, we don't have any choice. Yes.
And I'm just in response to.
I'm sorry. I think, Andy, you had your hand up first before anybody else.
I was just gonna say that, that starting on July 11th, we will have 2 or 3 additional AmeriCorps Vista volunteers whose sole focus will be on economic opportunities and neighborhood stabilization. I welcome, Mayor, I welcome your comments with regard to having a year to plan. That sounds like a project that we could put an AmeriCorps Vista member on to look at transportation needs in the city of Albion, regardless of where their destination is, regardless of where the origin is, and I applaud that. And I think that's an excellent idea.
So just 2 things. I don't think we have a year, because I think this expires at the end of this year.
No, it expires at the end of their next fiscal year in 2017, which is September 30th of 2017.
Which would be September of 2017. I thought this was a temporary fix till like the first of the year. This 45,000 will take us till September 31st.
Right.
I do believe, of 2017, okay? That gives us this time period to figure out whether we want to continue this service or not. Hopefully, we got some of these services here in Albion where you don't have to take a bus to go someplace. But we also have to understand the millennium. Did not understand that. I guess I'm too old. I don't know. People are not getting driver's licenses like they used to. I did not realize that. They're riding bicycles. They're taking other types of transportation. That's why we're talking with Battle Creek, with their big transit for the whole county, because more and more people are taking those buses and things. Like, I didn't realize that till I got into this meeting. And so in the long run, I see the connector probably stopping if the county picks up on what they want to do, which will be transportation for the whole county. And it won't be just a little trip that we're doing. This was a thing we had to face. And like I said, I hate to, do things like this, but, I know I disconnected with some things that I honestly said, and then I got to thinking now that the 45,000, if you break that down for a 12-month period, it's not that bad. So I'd like to, like I said, I think Cheryl will do her best to get that money back to us, even if she has to take it out of her own pay or her own raises and, things like that, so.
The one thing I was going to, the second part of my comment I was going to say is something that Councilmember Reed said, is that one of the things that, I still would be in favor of, would be, and we talked about this, an assistant city manager, right? Or some kind of assistant, right? As important as that would be to, moving the community forward, I don't think we would, and this is what I'm trying to get at in terms of the seriousness of what we're doing, we wouldn't dip into general fund balance.
Exactly.
To fund that, right? So that's what I'm trying to say is like,
Yep.
We wouldn't do that, and that would be helpful for moving economic things forward, getting things done, but we're being asked to do this, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I say
Maurice,
it's not.
you had your hand up, I'm sorry.
The conversation has opened up some emotions with me. Some of you are adamant that this $45,000 absolutely is going here. However, we do not have tangible numbers on exactly how many people are taking the rides for health care, for dialysis. We're using that as an umbrella. We have a blanket number of 500 riders. Then we got some percentages on a pie graph. We don't know exactly how many people are using this, and we're talking about making a vote concerning this presentation. Okay. I have streets over on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd that haven't been done since actually put in. And this is $45,000 that we found our 15% balance up to 32%, that I was hoping that these residents who have waited over 50 years to get the streets put in, now we're saying we're willing to give the money to an unknown possible ridership of people going to healthcare, when there's other available transportation. If this goes out in 2017, what will they do then? This was a poorly made business plan. There was no buffer, there was no contingency plan, there was no alternative to an alternative. Now everyone has to be emotional, throw our money in the hat, and it's not sustainable. We're throwing money into the wind. These people can come up with rides, and rides are available. Even if they would have the taxi service here or the dollar ride. Before this came, they made it. Dialysis people are gonna get to dialysis. I think that this 45,000 should stay where it is. Thank you.
Okay. If there is no further, we will have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Reed.
Yes.
Brown.
No.
Decker.
Yes.
Kraus. French.
Yes.
Barnes.
No.
And Mayor Domingo.
I'm sorry, I have to say yes. And I know I disappointed some people tonight. I'll explain myself if you allow me to, okay? Going to be request approval resolution 2016-39, the agreement with Albion Marshall Connector.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. I think we all know how we feel, but I have to open it up for any discussion if there is any. If there isn't any, we'll have a roll call vote on the agreement between Albion Marshall Connector.
Councilmember Brown.
No.
Decker.
Yes.
French.
Yes.
Barnes.
No.
Reed. Mayor Domingo.
Yes. D, motion to excuse Cheryl this evening. She did call and let me know. Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote on that. I'm sorry, no wonder I didn't. Future agenda items.
Aren't we doing single hauler next time, or is that pushed till July?
July,
July?
So
Okay.
is there a reason why it was pushed to July?
just to have time to actually have the full packet to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm concerned about that because I brought it up last year. We talked about it actually at one budget session. We were in the fire barn. We had the work session in March. And we had a copy of the previous
Push.
RFP, and I'm just concerned about the time frame, like he's getting pushed back. So,
Doesn't leave us a long time. It doesn't leave us a lot of time. What is he gonna bring to us when they do it in July?
The actual RFP document?
So, from that point, they have to be sent out to the haulers. Okay, so it's been
over a year.
3 months, 4 months?
It's been longer.
Okay, so now we're gonna send them out, now we won't get them back, let's see, we don't get it here till July, we send them out August, maybe later than that, huh? Wow.
Well, I thought the anticipation was that the service would start in January. So
Okay,
we wanted to have the numbers in time for the budget.
okay.
I mean,
Any other further agenda items? See none. Okay, now, motion to excuse absent council members.
So moved.
Moved
Support.
and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, the same. Cheryl is excused. Citizens' comments, persons addressing the city council shall limit their comments to no more than 5 minutes. Proper decorum is required. Are there any citizens' comments this evening? Come forward with your name and your address and speak your piece. Quietly. No.
My name is Dawn Smith. Address is 1415 Cooper Street. I haven't been here in Albion all too long. I'm a rather new resident, just here a little bit over a year. You'll have to excuse me for being emotional. This has been a very emotional issue for me. I reached out to Cheryl when I learned that this was going to be impacting me so. I use the connector a couple times a week for medical appointments, for shopping. It helps me remain independent. I am low vision, so I have significant vision loss, but in able to keep me independent, I have used the connector on such a regular basis so that I'm not relying on my husband so much. And so I want to say thank you for those of you that voted yes on this. I was really struck with emotion when the mayor was so adamant on how important this was to the community, because it is. And it isn't just me, because I ride on such a regular basis. I see who the ridership is. You know, it is productive people in your community, and for whatever reason, you know, they are needing to go over to our neighboring town. But with this service, it allows me to remain in Albion and to be a participating member of the society here. Both my husband and I are taxpayers, homeowners. You have income coming in from us to help support this service. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens' comments this evening? I see none. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
Moved in support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same, and we thank you all very much.
Oh, sorry. Cheryl.